His house was raided by the police. He was arrested and handcuffed at the age of 13. An innocent boy or a cruel killer? Get ready because this story will take your breath away. The series begins on day 1, with a man listening to an audio message from his son on the phone. His name is Luke and he is a police officer. He is on duty with his colleague Misha in an escort. The escort moves towards somewhere. When they arrive, the police get organized. They break down the door of a house and invade it, subduing whoever was inside. They go upstairs and find a boy lying in his bed. They declare the arrest of the boy on suspicion of murder. The boy's name is Jamie Miller and the residence belongs to the Miller family. Everyone is extremely scared by the approach. The police search the house for evidence. Jamie's father accompanies him and leaves his oldest daughter, Lisa, with her mother, Manda. None of the police officers explain anything to them. Manda goes towards her son, but the police officers stop her. At this point, the father, Eddie, asks for an explanation and Detective Misha tells him that his son is being arrested on suspicion of murder and will be questioned. She gives them a form for possible reimbursement for the damages to the house. The idea that her 13-year-old son was a murderer seemed absurd. Jamie is taken away and his father follows him to the car. Luke tries to calm him down, but the boy only repeats that he wants his father and that he did nothing. In the car with them is Derek from social services to help Jamie. Luke gives him instructions on what to do when they get to the police station. They arrive at the police station. The inspector takes Jamie through the police station. He goes through an intake form. The officer asks all the necessary questions and gives the boy instructions. He is quite scared when he realizes that his parents have arrived, but the officer does not let them talk to him. Jamie is taken to a cell while he waits. Inspector Luke goes to the room where Jamie's parents are. He says that if they need it, he has a lawyer to recommend, which they reluctantly accept. Manda questions the abrupt approach to her home, but the inspector assures her that the approach was only necessary and without aggression, and if they disagreed they could file a formal complaint. He goes on to say that Jamie requested his father as legal guardian during the evidence collection process. Eddie accepts. Before they continue, the inspector warns Eddie that if his son confessed to anything related to the case he is being accused of, he could not be the boy's legal guardian. Eddie denies any possibility that his son committed any crime. The inspector listens to him and leaves the room. Manda talks to a friendly neighbor to watch her house, as the door was broken into. Eddie asks her to tell the neighbor not to tidy up anything and to take photos of everything and send them so they can fill out the form. Lisa admits to being very scared and her mother tries to reassure her by saying that it was certainly a mistake. He sees Officer Misha and asks for his son, but she asks him to wait. She goes to her office and there is Luke. He asks if Jamie's father worries her. She asks why and he says that he has worked on a case where it took a long time to find out what the father was doing with his son. Misha says he didn't notice anything unusual. He lets it go and they start to analyze what they have so far. They need a few more authorizations, but they have to wait. Luke leaves the room. A police officer approaches him. The council wants to know which facility to take Jamie to. Luke says that when the time comes they will decide where to take him. He calls his wife to see how they are and to see if his son went to school. He hangs up the phone and goes back to his room. In the cell, Jamie is with his father. He is with his father and a woman asks him some questions. After the questions, the boy starts to cry and says he wants to go home. He asks his father if he believes him and Eddie says yes. He is asked to leave the cell. The lawyer assigned to Jamie's case arrives at the police station and is sent to the room where Eddie, Manda and Lisa are. He asks if they have any complaints about how they were treated and they report what happened. The lawyer promises to look into the situation. He also asks about Jamie. His father says he doesn't seem well. After introducing himself, the lawyer leaves the room to find out more about the case and goes to another room. There he meets with Misha and Luke. They report the time and place of the crime. The lawyer comments on the approach at the Miller house and asks if they can give any details about the victim. Luke says he will know soon and that they are still looking for the victim's relatives. The lawyer asks what procedures have been done with the boy so far. Luke and Misha give all the details available. At that moment, a police officer informs them that they are ready to collect samples and they leave the room. A police officer calls Eddie to accompany Jamie to collect samples. Jamie arrives right behind. They take photos of the boy. The lawyer meets Jamie and introduces himself. They collect Jamie's saliva, collect his fingerprints and ask for the password to the boy's cell phone to access his information. The lawyer advises him not to give out the password and so Jamie does. When it's time to collect the blood, the boy refuses because he is afraid of needles. The The police officer informs him that this could harm his defense and the lawyer agrees. Eddie supports his son and he gives in, even though he is very uncomfortable. The police officer asks Jamie to take off his clothes so he can do an intimate search. Eddie objects and tries to argue, but the police officer insists, saying it is necessary. Eddie also insists and says that this is not right. The lawyer says that they need to do this or his defense will be harmed. Eddie argues with the officers, but Jamie agrees to do it. While everyone turns around for the search to be carried out, his father watches everything indignantly. The search is very thorough. They collect Jamie's clothes and give him another one. They are taken to a room to talk to the lawyer in private. He talks to Jamie and asks them questions so they can interact. Talking about the case, the lawyer tells Jamie that he just needs to answer, without commenting. Jamie asks if this applies to all questions and the lawyer gives some examples of when he should answer like this. Jamie says he did nothing wrong and the lawyer leaves them. Eddie goes after him and asks what he can do. He recommends not answering for his son and just being himself. Eddie admits that he is scared and that his son is innocent and a good boy. The lawyer says that the police have very strong evidence and that is why they carried out such an aggressive operation and collected Jamie's blood. He ends by asking Eddie to pull himself together and accompany his son while they prepare for the interrogation. Alone with his son, he asks if Jamie is okay and the boy says yes. Eddie decides to ask the boy if he was the one who killed the victim. Jamie looks into his father's eyes and assures him that it was not him. At that moment, the lawyer calls them in for questioning. Luke and Misha begin the interrogation. Luke reads Jamie his rights. The inspector asks Jamie what he did last night, and the boy answers without comment. Luke asks again and he answers without comment. Luke says he checked Jamie's report card and that he has good grades. He says that the report card talks about behavioral problems last year, and he asks what those problems are. Jamie answers that he doesn't know. The inspector asks who Jamie's best friends are and he answers without comment. Luke asks about the boy's love life. He shows him photos of models that the boy posted on his Instagram, and underneath the photos there are many aggressive comments and insinuations made by Jamie. Luke shows him a photo that he took and posted with some friends and asks who they are. The boy says who they are. Luke asks some questions like where they met and what they like to do. Then he asks if he went out with his friends last night and what time he got home. Jamie answers without comment. Luke asks what clothes he wore last night and he answers that he doesn't remember. The inspector asks if Jamie recognizes the sneakers in the photo, but the boy says he doesn't remember. Misha asks if he knows Kate Leonard and shows him a picture of her. Jamie confirms that he knows her. She asks if they get along and Jamie says yes. She asks if they are friends, but Jamie says he is not sure. He asks if she was the one who died. Luke interrupts, saying that it was very clever of him to ask that question and that he believes he already knew that. Misha continues asking about their friendship and Jamie answers without comment. She asks if he was attracted to the girl and he says no. She also asks if they have ever had any conversations with sexual connotations. Eddie interrupts, but Misha insists and Jamie answers no. Luke tells him the place where Kate's body was found and the time. He asks where Jamie was at that time. Jamie answers without comment. Luke asks if Jamie killed Kate and he answers no. They say that the girl was stabbed many times all over her body. The lawyer interrupts, asking for a break to talk, but Eddie does not allow it. Luke and Misha show security camera footage showing Jamie and his friends, and the footage crosses Jamie and Kate's path. The boy doesn't know what to say. Luke insists and asks why he followed the girl, but he says he didn't follow her. He swears he didn't do anything wrong. Finally, after all of Jamie's denials, police officer Luke shows a video where Jamie and Kate meet and argue. The argument ends with Jamie stabbing the girl multiple times. Her father watches the video in disbelief and not knowing what to say. Jamie starts to cry while Eddie is perplexed. Luke deduces that the boy got rid of his clothes, but kept his sneakers, and that the forensic examination would certainly find what they need to arrest him. Luke gives Jamie a chance to explain himself and even apologize to the victim's family, but the boy doesn't say anything. The police end the interrogation, the lawyer leaves the room and leaves Jamie with his father. Jamie tries to talk to his father, but Eddie cries, not believing that his son was a murderer. Eddie asks his son why he did it and the boy says it wasn't him and that he didn't do anything. The episode begins on the 3rd. A memorial for Kate has been held in front of her school. There are Inspector Luke Bascombe and Misha Frank. They are waiting for one of the teachers in charge of the school to welcome them to talk to the students at Jamie's school. She arrives and lets them in. One of Jamie's friends is outside the school and goes to another friend. It was Ryan and Tommy. They talk about the fact that the police are at the school. Ryan says he doesn't like it at all and asks if Tommy has heard from Jamie because he hasn't been able to talk to him, and Tommy says no. After all, Jamie certainly couldn't keep his cell phone. Ryan asks Tommy if he thinks it was Jamie, and he says yes. Ryan also asks if the police came to his house, if they asked about the knife and what he said, and Tommy says that they did and asked about the knife, but his father told him not to say anything. The inspector's son, Adam, studies at the same school. He is in the cafeteria when he is approached by a bully trying to take money from the boy, but is saved by one of the teachers. The principal passes by talking to one of the teachers, saying that 14 parents asked about the school's security. They talk about what happened and about the impact this story could have on the school, and the principal asks the teacher to keep an eye on everything. Meanwhile, Professor Fenimore sends Luke and Misha to talk to a student. Her name is Jade. They enter the room and start talking. Jade is not very comfortable with the conversation and seems to be there by force. Luke tells the girl that a suspect has been arrested, but she already knew it was Jamie. Jade was Kate's best friend. Luke needs more information and asks what Jade can tell him about her friend, but the girl responds by talking about Adam, but she completely changes the subject and is extremely hostile to the police. She is angry because the police have evidence and a culprit, and yet, according to her, they are not doing their job. The inspector releases Jade, and Mrs. Fenimore takes them to Jamie's class. Upon arriving in the classroom, Luke talks about the crime and that they made an arrest, but they still haven't found the murder weapon. One of Jamie's classmates seems to find the situation funny, but the inspector seriously asks them to let him know if they have anything to say. As they leave the classroom, Luke talks to Misha, saying that they need to find the knife because without it, Jamie would have bargaining power over them. Besides, they still haven't discovered the motive for the crime. Even with the images, he needs more. He also comments on the anger Jade was feeling and how it gave the impression that Kate hated Jamie. Ms. Fenimore returns and continues to accompany them. As she directs them to another part of the school, she mentions that she once taught Kate and that she remembers how intelligent the girl was. Misha comments that the crime was a shock to everyone. As they go up the stairs, Luke asks Misha to keep an eye on the students' reactions when they get to the next classroom. It doesn't take long for them to reach Adam's, Luke's son's, classroom. One of the students makes fun of Adam. The teacher calls him out and apologizes to the detective, and as he starts to speak, the fire alarm goes off and all the students are immediately removed from their classrooms. Everyone is directed outside the school, where Luke sees Jamie's class teacher and tries to talk to him. Luke asks about what Jamie was like and if he showed any signs of unhappiness, but the teacher doesn't answer, dodges him, and leaves. Luke passes Jade outside, who, upon seeing Jamie's friend Ryan, goes after him, punching and kicking the boy and calling him a murderer. As a crowd of students gather around the fight, she hits and yells at Ryan until someone separates them. Ryan is taken to the infirmary, but Luke and Misha saw everything and asked to speak to Ryan, and Professor Fenimore takes them to the boy. The school is quite chaotic and the situation is affecting everyone. They arrive at the infirmary and there is Ryan. They sit next to the boy and talk. Luke starts to question Ryan, but the boy says that Tommy told him that they were at his friend's house and his father advised him not to say anything, but that it's okay for him to talk. Luke talks to Ryan about popularity. The boy seems to be very concerned about the subject. Luke asks Ryan questions. He asks if Jamie was sad on the night of the crime and what they talked about. Ryan replies that Jamie seemed normal that night and that they just went for a walk. Luke also asks if Jamie talked about his feelings and Ryan quickly replies that he didn't. Luke asks to talk about Kate, but Ryan cuts him off, saying that he didn't know anything about the girl. Luke insists and asks to talk about Jamie, but Ryan says that he didn't know anything about what his friend was going to do. The inspector insists a little more, asking if Jamie and Kate were friends, but Ryan assures them that they weren't. Ryan suddenly gets up and leaves the room, even though he hasn't been released yet. He leaves without paying any more attention to what the inspector is saying. Meanwhile, in one of the rooms, Professor Bailey is with Jade. A teacher tells them that her mother was informed of the incident. The teacher talks to Jade about what happened to her friend and that she should have stayed home. Jade can't stay home and says that she would be at her friend's house at this time. Bailey advises her to go to her friend's house and talk to her friend's parents, but Jade interrupts her and asks if she's going to get in trouble for the fight. The teacher responds by saying that she doesn't know and that it will depend on what Ryan decides. After all, she attacked him and he can file a complaint. The teacher asks why Jade did that and she responds that she doesn't know. Bailey says that she understands Jade but doesn't know if Ryan has anything to do with all of this. Jade vents and says that her best friend is gone and now she has no one left. Bailey supports her, But when she says that she's going to find someone for her to talk to, Jade jumps out of her chair saying that she won't go to another therapist and runs out of the room. Adam is in the hallways. He looks for his father and finds him in one of the classrooms. He asks to speak to his father in private and the teacher takes them to a room. Adam says that Luke doesn't understand what's going on. He shows Kate's posts and comments on Instagram. He explains that there is a language that few people understand, usually only teenagers and young people understand, and that Kate bullied Jamie on social media using codes with emojis. She insinuated that Jamie was not interesting and that he would die single and a virgin, and many people liked the post. Adam opened his father's eyes to a new reality that had been hidden from him until then. With that, Luke understood the reason for the crime. He shares the information with Misha and Professor Fenimore. Misha and Luke talk outside the school, and she confesses that this whole story irritates her, the fact that the protagonist of the story is always the murderer and not the murdered girl. Everyone will eventually know who Jamie Miller was, but not everyone will remember Kate Leonard. Luke disagrees and says that their duty is to solve the case and understand why. He returns to the school to talk to Ryan again. The inspector thinks that Ryan is hiding something. When he arrives at Ryan's classroom and says that he wants to talk to the boy, Ryan jumps out the window and runs away through the school. Luke chases the boy through the streets and manages to catch up with him. He puts Ryan against the wall and asks if he knows anything about Kate's bullying of Jamie, and he says he doesn't know anything, but he changes the subject. Luke presses the boy and asks if he helped Jamie. Ryan confesses that the knife Jamie used was his, but that he doesn't know where it is now. The inspector arrests Ryan on suspicion of complicity in a murder and the police take Ryan away. Before leaving, Luke stops to talk to his son. He invites him to eat and spend some time together and Adam accepts. Nearby, as everyone leaves the school, Eddie pays tribute to Kate at her memorial. 7 months have passed since Jamie was arrested. A woman is accessing the police station where Jamie is being held. Her name is Bryony Ariston. She is a psychologist and is responsible for evaluating Jamie Miller during the time he was in prison. She meets with a police officer who receives her. Bryony received a report that said Jamie was involved in a violent incident and she asks to look at the camera recordings of the fight. The police officer plays it as Bryony requested. He tells her that Jamie has been very quiet and that the fight was no big deal, but Bryony had already read the report. The police officer asks her questions and mentions what the previous psychologist's work was like, but Bryony interrupts him asking him not to mention anything about the other psychologist's work so as not to influence her assessment. The police officer directs her to the room where she will meet with Jamie, but before that she stops to get hot chocolate. Jamie likes hot chocolate. She is taken to the room where Jamie is waiting for her. They seem to get along well. Jamie chats casually with Bryony and she brings him snacks, knowing exactly what the boy likes. This time, in addition to the hot chocolate, she brought a sandwich. She comments that he seems better than the last time they saw each other. Bryony asks some questions related to Jamie's family and he answers all of them calmly. They even seem to be having fun. The psychologist tries to talk to Jamie about his grandparents and asks what they are like. He doesn't give many details, but he answers the questions. They talk about his grandfather and his father. She tries to understand what his relationship with his grandfather is like and how often they talk. Jamie says that his relationship with his grandmother is more frequent. Bryony continues talking about Jamie's grandfather and his father, but Jamie interrupts her saying that last time she asked real questions, unlike now, she is just talking nonsense. He ends by saying that the conversation seems like a trick and that there is nothing wrong with his father or family because they are good. He asks to see Bryony's notes but she says that he can't see. Jamie's behavior slowly starts to change and the conversation starts to get a little tense. He says that the lawyers say that the psychologists work for him and insists on seeing the notes. Bryony denies Jamie because she spoke to the lawyers and they assure her that they didn't say anything of the sort. While Jamie insists on seeing the reports, Bryony explains that she is an independent psychologist and that she doesn't work for Jamie or his lawyers. She writes a pre-sentence report so that the judge can know whether or not Jamie understands his charges. She says that she just wants to talk, but Jamie doesn't seem interested anymore. They talk about what they talked about in the last meeting about his mother, sister and friends. Jamie gets angry and Bryony says that she has a lot of things she wants to ask. She decides to talk about the fight Jamie had and the boy says that it was the other boy who hit him first. He cuts her off saying that it was nothing serious. Jamie now speaks in a sarcastic and angry tone. Bryony asks him how he feels about masculinity and Jamie answers obscenely the psychologist, but she doesn't care and insists on asking the question. Jamie says he doesn't know how to answer, and Bryony explains that this is why she asks things like what his relationship is with his father and grandfather and what that means to him. That way he would be able to get an answer. So, she asks again about Jamie's father. He says that his father works a lot and that sometimes he's funny. Sometimes he gets angry, but he's never hit him. Bryony tries to delve deeper into the questions and tries to find out what Eddie's anger is like. Jamie tries to get away from the subject by saying that it's a common anger like anyone else's. The most he's ever done was destroy a shed because of his anger, and Jamie assumes that Lisa and he found it funny. This behavior is very rare according to Jamie. Bryony asks what he's like most of the time, and Jamie replies by saying that she seems suspicious of his father, but the psychologist assures her that she just wants to get to know him better because he's a very present figure in Jamie's life, so much so that she chose him as his legal representative. Jamie assures her that his father is a kind guy and likes any sport, but despite this, Jamie is not very fond of sports and even makes excuses for not participating in physical education classes, which by the way his parents do not know. Despite all this, Jamie says that his father always took him to football games. It was just a social match on the weekends, and his father cheered him on, but whenever he missed, his father was disappointed. Jamie thinks that the reason for this attitude is that he was ashamed of his son. Bryony asks why he would be ashamed of Jamie, but Jamie expected comfort from the psychologist, which she didn't give, so Jamie argues with Bryony. But she doesn't let herself be shaken and says that she didn't like sports at school either. Jamie says that even so, she was good at other subjects, at least that's what it seemed like. Jamie doesn't think he's good at other subjects and didn't care much about it. Bryony tries more and more to understand what Jamie's life and family were like before the murder and being arrested. Although they've known each other for some time, Jamie has a tendency to be explosive at times, which can make it difficult for him to interact with Bryony. At that point, Jamie was no longer the scared boy from the first episode. Bryony says she spoke to her father on the phone and that he is fine. Jamie is surprised by the news, and after so long he wants to go home. He asks if she is going to get him out of there, but Bryony's job is to report and analyze. Jamie gets angry and starts arguing with the psychologist. On one side he says that living in that prison is crazy and that the environment and everyone there are chaotic, nothing is as it should be, and he could no longer stand being locked up in a reformatory while Ryan, for example, was responding in freedom. Jamie still declares himself innocent, and Bryony on the other side says that Ryan was not being accused of a heinous crime, but Jamie was. Jamie stands up and asks if Bryony can't get him out of there or if she doesn't want to do it. She responds by asking him to sit down or she would end the meeting. At that moment Jamie explodes and throws the hot chocolate away and screams at the top of his lungs at Bryony, getting closer and cursing right in her face as if he wanted to threaten her, leaving the psychologist shocked. Then a police officer comes in and asks if everything is okay, but Bryony says that everything is fine. The police officer asks if she wants Jamie to leave the room, but she says that she doesn't need to, and Jamie apologizes. Bryony gets up and leaves the room for a minute, but before doing so, Jamie kindly asks her to get him another hot chocolate, as if nothing had happened, and she agrees. Bryony is agitated and stressed. She didn't expect such an attitude. She stops to take a breath. The police officer comes in to see if everything is okay, but she replies by asking if he can watch the room through the cameras, and he lets her. While watching the cameras, the police officer talks to her, even though she doesn't give him much to talk about. The police officer says that according to the book he is reading, people hide a lot of things, and that the secret to discovering these lies is through body language. Bryony thanks him for his kindness and leaves the room, immediately returning to the room where Jamie was. She enters with determination and says that she needs to do what she does so that she can have an insight into what Jamie thinks. Despite what happened, Jamie, now extremely tame, agrees to answer everything Bryony wants to know without causing trouble. She asks how Eddie treats Manda, Jamie's mother. She wants to know if Eddie is friends with other women and how he treats them, but Jamie says that he only has male friends. But she wants to know if Jamie has female friends or just male friends. She also asks if the boy has relationships with girls, if he would like to have a girlfriend and what he would do with her if he did. Jamie replies that he would like to have a girlfriend and that he would take her to the movies to watch a horror movie. After that, maybe stop somewhere and make out, making physical contact. Bryony delves deeper into the questions and goes into detail about sexual relations. Jamie says that he has had physical sexual contact with other girls his age and that he has seen intimate photos of them, but when Bryony asks for details, Jamie admits that it is all a lie. He has not had any kind of relationship or contact, but the part about the photos was true. Bryony asks if one of the photos was of Kate, and Jamie is surprised by Bryony's assertive deduction, and she continues to ask how he felt. Embarrassed, he says he liked it. She asks how he feels seeing this kind of content with people he knows, if it makes him feel powerful. Jamie answers that it's actually weird and he wasn't attracted to Kate because she wasn't his type. He used the expression too straight. According to Jamie, the photos were for one of his friends and Kate sent them deliberately. The psychologist asks Jamie if he thinks other girls are attracted to him and he says no. He thinks he's ugly, and as soon as Bryony asks him how he feels about being ugly, instead of comforting him by saying that she doesn't think he's ugly, Jamie loses control again, throwing his chair away and yelling. Just like before, this time he stares at her very closely and intimidates her, scaring her in the end. Although very angry, Jamie sits down again to end the meeting. Bryony continues with the questions. She now talks about bullying, stating that Jamie and his friends were bullied at school. She bases her answer on Jamie's own accounts. Despite this, the boy dodges the questions and is not clear in his answers. Bryony questions Jamie about Jamie's Instagram account and why he would have one. She sits next to Jamie and shows him screenshots of Kate's posts on Jamie's Instagram. She asks what the emojis mean. Jamie explains the meaning and what Kate meant in the posts, in the same way that Adam had explained to Inspector Bascomb. Bryony asks if Kate had done this to anyone else and Jamie says no. Bryony asks what he did about it and he says he talked to her, but Kate didn't pay much attention to Jamie. He says he tried to apologize to her for seeing her intimate photos, an attempt to get closer to Kate. All to make Kate like him when everyone was talking badly about her. Bryony points out that Jamie said he didn't like her. He defends himself by saying that even though she was, according to him, straight, he didn't care and still put on his best clothes and asked her out. But Kate just laughed and replied, "I'm not that desperate." It was only after that the messages with emojis started. Jamie admits that he didn't touch her that day. Even though he had the opportunity and Kate was actually the way she was, he didn't touch her. Jamie had the knife and Kate saw it and got scared, but that was it. Jamie apologizes for speaking ill of Kate, but Bryony says it's too late to say what he thought of Kate, and whoever committed the crime ruined her future. She then asks Jamie if he understands that murder is a crime and that if he is found guilty he will be arrested. Jamie understands the situation. Bryony tells Jamie that this is their last session and as advice she recommends that he accept any mental health services that are offered to him. Meanwhile, Jamie is upset and complains indignantly that this is their last meeting. Bryony ends it immediately and calls the police officer to take Jamie away, but first he asks to ask her something. He asks if Bryony likes him and she responds by saying that she went there as a professional and that's all. This angers Jamie and he leaves, carried by the police officer. Bryony cries and tries to compose herself. All of this was too much for her. And she leaves the room. The last episode of the series begins with Eddie at home, taking care of his life. He seems worried about his son's situation. Manda is also at home and preparing breakfast for Eddie's birthday. They talk and smile even in the face of so many problems. Eddie goes to open the letters he received for his birthday. His whole family sent their regards. At that moment, Lisa enters the living room agitated and calls Eddie. Something happened to their van. When they get outside, the van had been graffitied with the word pervert, probably by Jamie's haters. Eddie asks Manda to call the police. Meanwhile, he reassures his daughter seconds before going inside to get soap and water to try to clean the van. Manda is on the line with the police reporting what happened. Eddie says it must have happened after 8 p.m. She goes to the van and tells the police what is written and asks Lisa to take pictures so she can send them to the police. Manda goes in and talks to Eddie. She is nervous, but he asks her to calm down and think about Lisa. Manda doesn't like Eddie telling her what to do and they start arguing. They talk about Jamie and how his trial will happen in 1 month. Eddie says that everything will be fine because Jamie will be protected and so will they. Manda insists and suggests moving and asking her mother for help to apply for a job for Eddie. But when she says this, Eddie gets angry and says that he doesn't need Manda's mother to work and that he has everything under control. As he leaves the kitchen, Eddie notices that Lisa was on the stairs listening to the argument between the two, but he doesn't have time for that and goes to clean the van. Lisa goes up to her room and Manda follows her. She asks if her daughter has already sent the pictures by email and she says yes. Lisa asks if Eddie is okay and Manda says he is fine, he just needs some time. Lisa is confused and doesn't understand the reason for the graffiti, not with that word. And her father wasn't the reason. Everything is so confusing and complicated. No one knows exactly how to deal with the situation. Eddie scrubs the van as he promised, but the paint isn't coming off. Eddie is bothered by the neighbors who watch everything but don't help at all. At that moment 2 teenagers on bikes pass by and shout, "Scrub, Pervert. Eddie runs after them, but can't catch them. He shouts, but they don't respond. Eddie goes back inside the house and tells Manda that they need to go out and go to a store to buy something to remove the paint. Manda and Lisa don't want to go, they want to stay home, but Eddie convinces them to go. After all, it could be dangerous to be alone. They get in the van and leave. Eddie starts a conversation with his family and asks Lisa to put on some music. He also says that when they get back from the store, they're going to go for a walk, maybe go to the movies. After all, it's still Eddie's birthday, even with all this. But Manda demands the special breakfast that they haven't had yet because of the confusion. They talk about various subjects on the way, and Manda tells her about the school dance with Eddie. She tells him that he was wearing a pink wig and how he danced to one of his favorite bands. She tells him about the moment when he slipped and fell face down on the floor. That was the night of their first kiss. They arrive at the store. While Manda and Lisa go shopping, Eddie goes to a salesman and asks for something to remove graffiti from his van. The guy takes him to another salesman who is more experienced in the subject. The salesman recommends a hose and specific products and takes Eddie to a section, but Eddie isn't confident that the paint will come off and asks the salesman to show him where the paint section is so he can buy some blue paint. The salesman tries to make conversation with Eddie and talks to him. At that moment, the salesman recognizes Eddie, but Eddie just wants the paint so he can leave. The salesman takes Eddie to the paint section, but before he does, he says that he is on Jamie's side and that he doesn't believe the police's version of events. He says that there are many bones in the place where the girl was stabbed and it would be very difficult for a 13-year-old boy to have that much strength. He also says in a low voice that he saw the pictures of the girl, at which point Eddie cuts him off and asks for the paint. The boy hands him the paint and leaves. Eddie is extremely tense and angry. He goes to the cashier with the paint. Lisa talks to him, but he doesn't hear anything around him until he gets to the cashier. He seems to calm down a little, but as soon as he leaves, he recognizes from afar the boys who showed up on their bikes at his house earlier. Eddie doesn't think twice about running after them and grabs one of them by the collar. They admit that they were the ones who spray painted the van, but it was all a joke. Eddie threatens to beat them up if they come near his house again and throws the boy's bike. At this point, Eddie is a nervous wreck. He grabs a screwdriver, opens the can of paint and throws it at the van on top of the graffiti. He asks his family to get in the van so they can leave. Eddie argues with the store's security guard and everyone around watches in horror as Eddie gets in the van and leaves. Manda and Lisa don't know what to say and everyone is silent. Eddie drives for a long time without anyone saying a word. At that moment, Eddie's phone rings and Lisa answers. It's Jamie. The boy called to wish his father a happy birthday. One of the cards Eddie received earlier was from Jamie. Eddie compliments the drawing and talks to his son. Jamie tells him how his detention has been. Eddie tells him how his day has been, but doesn't go into details. Jamie takes advantage of the call to tell his father that with the trial coming up, he has had second thoughts and is going to change his testimony. Eddie is speechless while driving and can only listen, just like the rest of his family. Jamie decides that he will plead guilty to the charges. At that moment, his mother and sister talk to him on the phone. He thought that only Eddie was listening, but he talks to them too. Jamie needs to end the conversation because his time is running out, but before the call ends, he apologizes to his father. The news shook Jamie's family even more, making everything even sadder and more complicated than it already was. Any hope they still had that Jamie would be acquitted went down the drain. Manda cries with sadness when she enters the house and goes straight up to her room. When she gets there, Eddie is getting dressed. He put on his best clothes so that they could go out and take a walk like Eddie promised, but Manda tells them to forget it. There was no mood to go out, even if it was for Eddie's birthday. He agrees and they sit down to talk about their son. Manda says that this must have taken a weight off Jamie's shoulders and that Eddie should let his feelings out instead of keeping them bottled up. What happened earlier is not like Eddie. Manda assumes that maybe the best thing for everyone would be for Jamie to plead guilty, and she knows that Eddie thinks the same. Eddie decides to vent. He says that when he saw Jamie's video he didn't want to believe it. Manda goes on to say that Jamie would come home and go straight to the computer and stay up until the early hours of the morning. Eddie says that it's not her fault, that she couldn't control it. Manda thinks that all of this is their fault, because if they had realized something earlier, none of this would be happening. Eddie tells how his father used to beat him when he was little and that he promised never to do that to his children, because he wanted to be better than his father, but maybe he failed. He tells how it was when he took Jamie to soccer, even though the boy wasn't very good at it. The other parents would laugh at Jamie, but Eddie would stay there by his side, but at the same time, Jamie would look at him and Eddie couldn't look back. He also enrolled him in the box, but nothing came of it. Just like these memories, Eddie and Manda remember several other memories. They come to the conclusion that they are good parents and that none of this is their fault, because they had no way of knowing what would happen. Eddie tells Manda that Jamie kept repeating over and over that it wasn't him. And that's when he saw the video. Nothing made sense. At that moment Lisa enters the room and she is dressed in her best clothes and wearing makeup. She thought her father deserved this. Lisa says she knew the boys who painted the van. But they are not a danger. She asks them not to move. Moving might be easier at first, but later everything would go back to being chaotic. Manda suggests that they cancel the movie and stay home and enjoy their family. All of this happened in one morning, when Eddie and his family haven't even had breakfast yet. Manda goes downstairs to make coffee, but Eddie goes to Jamie's room. He looks around, remembering the good times with his son. This moves him and finally Eddie breaks down and cries about everything that has been happening. If this episode touched you in any way, leave a like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to continue following stories as intense as this one. Thanks for watching, and until next time.